Hi everyone, welcome. I'm pretty excited to put out this video today. It's been a while since I uploaded a video, or at least I thought, and then I checked today, and it turns out it's only been 2 weeks. So yeah, that should be a sign that I should definitely make some more videos, because yeah, I definitely feel motivated right now to keep uploading these videos for you guys. So anyways, this video is going to be talking about the state of the dating market in 2026. So the current dating market is very confusing for a lot of guys. It's not the way we were told, the way we were told it was going to be growing up. And things have rapidly changed. Even within the past 5 to 10 years, things have changed, Even after social media has came out, trends have continued to trend. Things have gotten worse. So yeah, this video is going to be addressing what characterizes our current dating market, what factors have led to the change in our dating market, and what does it take for a guy to have success in this dating market, as well as how do different groups feel about our current dating market. So what encompasses the dating market? This video I'm going to be talking mainly about the dating market in the West, because that's probably where most of my viewers are from. And that's also where we see the most amount of issues for men, the highest rates of inceldom and stuff like that. The dating market is basically it's basically an analogy comparing sex to a market. And it's a very useful analogy. A lot of people act like love and sex are these sacred things, but really they're pretty transactional. They're more transactional than people would like to act like they are. You're generally not gonna see a very unattractive man with a very attractive woman. You're not gonna see some bald, fat guy who works as a janitor and lives in his mom's basement dating hot women, or even dating any women at all for the most part. So dating is more or less about the exchange of value, and that's why it's called the sexual marketplace. But I'm not gonna call it the sexual marketplace in the title, because I don't know, that might be bad for the algorithm or whatever. But yeah, the dating market, sexual marketplace, same thing, essentially. So what characterizes our current dating market? I would say intense competition, high rates of inceldom or near inceldom. So what does this mean? So there isn't that much competition between women, it's definitely still there, but relative to men, it's not really that much competition. They compete for chads, but they don't really have to compete for any guys who are outside the top 5% or so. And this is a chart I made to illustrate that. I just took this PNG from Wikipedia and kind of edited it a little bit. Male-male intersexual competition, which is sexual competition between people of the same gender, of the same sex, has intensified, and it's much more intense than female-to-female intersexual competition. Part of this is just an aspect of biology. There's the parental investment hypothesis, which suggests that the gender that invests more in reproduction, in offspring, will be more selective. So more or less, this creates the dynamic where women are the choosers and men compete for their attention. And this has only intensified, let's say, in the past 50 years since the sexual revolution. And even within the past 10 years, it's probably gotten noticeably worse as far as hypergamy. Yeah, we're seeing high rates of inceldom or near inceldom because a lot of men simply can't compete on the sexual marketplace. They're being, priced out. They can't afford it anymore. That doesn't line up exactly with what I'm saying, but they can't compete because they don't have the necessary SMV in the current era. So access to casual sex is higher for women in the top 5% of men, but it's much lower for the bottom 95% of men than in previous decades. So this is mostly because of the rise of social media, because social media and dating apps allow for women to access any high-value man basically on the planet and send them a DM or send them a message or like them on a dating app. Well, dating apps show your local area mostly, and men have more access to women in the top 5% too, because before it would be hard to find women to have sex with. You would have to go to a club or a bar or something, or you would just have to pick up women on the street. But now you could just basically order women through your phone. It's like if you're like a Chad, if you're like top 5%, you can just have women come over to your place and you can hook up with them and then kick them out. You can pump and dump. But nowadays, because of increased competition, the bottom 95% aren't really able to do it as much. You know, before it was like if you were just like an average guy, you could go to maybe like a bar or club and it wouldn't be that hard to get laid. And that's just because these women didn't perceive themselves as having as high of an abundance of options as they do now. You know, they would maybe encounter a couple dozen men in their day-to-day lives, and then they would have to pick one of them. And there's a good chance that the one they picked would be you, because you would be one of the only guys that was approaching them, that was talking to them. One of the reasons why there's more access to casual sex nowadays for the top 5% of men and for women is because there's a lower stigma around hookups than there was, let's say, like 50 years ago. But I would still say it was easier as an average guy, or even just a guy that's in like the bottom 90%, to get laid like 50 years ago for the reasons I mentioned before. And, you know, these numbers aren't exact. I'm not sure if it's the top 5% of men that has seen an increase in access to casual sex. I'm not sure if it's the top 1%. I'm not sure if it's the top 10% or even 15 or 20%. I would kind of doubt those last two. But there has been an increase for a certain percentage of men in access to casual sex. So there, if I were to guess, there would be a higher distribution of men at the higher end of body count nowadays, but there would also be a higher distribution at the lower end. And you actually see data coming up to support this. 3 in 10 Americans report being signal, but this varies by age and gender. This is a Pew Research study. So as you can see, in the 18 to 29 category, 63% of men report being single. But in that same age cohort, only 34% of women report being single. So there are two competing explanations for this. One camp will say it's just because women are dating older men. And another camp will say it's because women are sharing men. And the more likely explanation is that the women are mostly unknowingly sharing men, because most young women are not dating outside of their age cohort. Not as much as this would suggest. Most women date guys that are their age or a couple of years older, not guys who are 10 plus years older. So it's more likely that they are sharing these high value guys and think they're in a relationship, but really the guy just sees it as more casual and just sees it as a non-committed friends with benefits thing. This is what women call situationships. It's when they're not actually officially dating some guy, but they're regularly seeing him and having sex with him. So these are some studies that I got off of Reddit that I think were originally from Wheat Waffles, so credit to Wheat Waffles. I'm sure many of you have seen this. Young male virginity is on the rise. This is an old chart at this point, but there's a clear spike from the 80s, the 2000s, to 2018, and probably to now, where young male virginity is rising, and women are having more casual sex. So a lot of people might say that this discrepancy, where a lot of men are being left out, is because they're just being right-wing. They're being chuds. They're being conservative. And they're not aligning with the right set of values. But this is a poll from Reddit, and it shows that left-wing males are more likely to say they're virgins than right-wing males. So presumably the left-wing males, if they're not feminists, they're definitely not going to be open misogynists or red pill, usually. So why are they reporting being virgins? The average partner count for women is increasing, which, I mean, there's some skepticism you can have about this where it's like there's just less slut shame now, so I'm not sure how relevant this is. But this is another chart. This is basically how likes work on Tinder. So the top 10% of men are getting 60% of the matches. And then the second 10% cohort is getting 20% of the matches. And then the bottom 80% are getting the last 20%. So they're getting barely any matches. Very few matches distributed among these men. So most matches go to the top 10%, a strong 60% majority, and then 80% of matches go to the top 20%. So more or less, if you're not in this top 10%, top 20% cohort, you're not really getting anything. And nowadays, online is the default method for people to meet, as well as social media. That isn't on here, but I'm sure that is also increased, considering social media didn't exist for these years over here. So that could be a large factor for this as well, where it's online. Women will generally select for the most attractive men when there isn't this social proof through a friend circle or maybe a little bit more familiarity through work or at a bar or whatever. Well, usually at a bar there isn't much familiarity, but anyways. So what has led to this change? I would say the biggest factors are the internet, dating apps, and social media, as well as feminism. So the internet has caused a surge in hypergamy because it gives women instant access to the most attractive men, but also a lot of attention from all kinds of men. Women have less of a reason to interact with any given man due to this perceived abundance. Social media affects women's mentalities in real life, not just online. A lot of people will say that you just have to log off, but the reality is that social media affects how women act in real life. They have this perceived abundance of options. So they know they can go on Tinder, they know they can go on Instagram, and they can find many men trying to have sex with them. So it gives them less of a reason to interact with any man that comes and tries to talk to them, even in real life. The second factor, of course, is feminism. Feminism tells women that men are trash, that they don't need men, that marriage and family creation aren't as important as career. Prior to second wave feminism, most women married young and aimed to be wives and mothers. So this encouraged them to marry just a regular guy because they needed stability. They needed some kind of stability. They couldn't just hook up with chads and work on their career. And maybe the gender dynamics of the past had their own problems. That's fair to say. But our new way has its own host of problems, and that's undeniable. So here are two quotes that a lot of feminists and women will say. So all men are trash, so you might as well date a tall guy. As well as have fun, then settle down, which can be translated as have situationships with chads in your teens and 20s, then marry a stable beta. So here's just a meme that says basically what that quote said before. They are all liars, so just pick the tallest and most good-looking one. Because if all men are trash, then you might as well just pick the one that looks the best and has the highest SMV. And here's a quote that this is roughly paraphrasing.
When looking for a life partner, my advice to women is date all of them. The bad boys, the cool boys, the commitment-phobic boys, the crazy boys, but do not marry them. The things that make the bad boys sexy do not make them good husbands. When it comes time to settle down, find someone who wants an equal partner, someone who thinks women should be smart, opinionated, ambitious, someone who values fairness and expects, or even better, wants to do his share in the home. These men do exist, and trust me, over time, nothing is sexier.
So, what does it take for a guy to have success in the current dating market? There are no perfect solutions, but there are 4 different kinds of men who I have noticed get results. So the first one is tall and good-looking men, obviously. The second one is social circle. The third one is pickup artists. And the fourth one is geomaxers. So, social circle. Women gain attraction through repeated proximity, and social circle works as social proof. And it's not just that they gain attraction, they also gain comfort. They get more comfortable with the guy. They lose the stranger danger factor. So looks does not reliably predict pairing after people have known each other intimately for months and years. When you see less attractive men with more attractive women, more often than not, it's because they share the social circle. On dating apps or with cold approach, women have much higher standards for looks and overall SMV. But this method has a lot of drawbacks. Questionable dynamics in these relationships you will often find. Often the lack of primal attraction. The kind of attraction that women would have with a guy that they hook up with because they find him good looking. Or swipe right on a dating app. It doesn't build the game skill set. So you're not going to learn how to sexualize, how to talk with women, how to, spike their emotions, how to hook them in. You're not going to learn all of that because you're learning how to meet women in a more friendly, casual way. And you will have difficulties when you don't have a social circle to fall back on. A lot of guys, once they leave college, they lose their social circle and they can't find women anymore. In college, a lot of them find it relatively easy to get laid because they have so many women that they're friends with or that their friends know that they can hook up with once they get drunk or whatever at a party or something like that. I don't really go to parties. And that shouldn't be that surprising. And then the other group I see get results are pickup artists. So in the West, if you don't have a social circle and you aren't a Chad Light or a Chad, you are swimming against the current. It's not going to be easy. Dating apps and cold approach are your only options, and with these, the odds are stacked against you. You're going to face a lot of rejection, and you're not going to have that much value going in because the girl doesn't know who you are. So your only option, if you don't have a social circle and you aren't a Chad Light or a Chad, is to become a pickup artist, which I know that's kind of a cringe term, but it means improving your game and executing massive volume, which means approaching a lot of women, approaching dozens or hundreds of women. This is a long, arduous journey with a lot of trauma, failure, and a steep learning curve. However, it does work. And the good thing about it is that most men aren't actually going to go down this path. Most men aren't going to try to become a pickup artist because they don't want to get rejected and they don't want to look inside themselves and see what they can improve. So if you decide to go down this path, which is kind of the path I think I'm set on, I'm not quite there yet, but this is something I want to work on, not just for my personal life, but also just for the sake of content. I want to make videos about my personal experiences going forward. I think that would be pretty beneficial. But yeah, this is basically a pretty untapped market right now, but I see it sometimes. And I see these guys that are just hounding after pussy. There are guys that aren't conventional pickup artists that are also doing this too. There's some guys that are recording videos of them approaching women that they don't even know what cold approach is. They're just talking to women. And I'm sure if you go to a bar, you'll see maybe 1 or 2 guys who is just, approaching women. These guys are trying to become pickup artists. They're probably not as good as people that are actually researching how this stuff works, learning from other guys. But it's a valid path to go down. I respect any guy that puts himself out there. So here we have geomaxers. These are men that enter a more favorable dating market. Popular spots include Latin America, especially Colombia, as well as Southeast Asia. It's much easier to get leads in these environments, especially if you are white. Why are these markets easier? For one, you have automatic status if you come from a rich country. Additionally, feminism has less of an influence. Women aren't brainwashed when they are young to view men as enemies, or view themselves as victims of a patriarchy. So geomaxing clearly isn't practical for every guy. Moving to a developing nation has many drawbacks, and if you bring a wife back home from one of these places, she will quickly become westernized. Still, it's a great option if you are getting close to no results and want more experience. Here's a screenshot of a Facebook group for unhappily married men who are married to Filipinas or other foreigners. So what's the best solution? So for most men, the best solution is going to be to try to become a pickup artist. And I know that sounds cringy, but really it just means learn game and learn social skills, learn charisma. So long as you are not below a 4 out of 10 in SMB. Otherwise, geomaxing is a good option. But that's not going to be every guy's first choice, or most men's first choice, because you have to move to a whole different country, you know. It's just easier and more practical to learn game, I'd say. And social circle. Social circle is temporary. It creates bad relationship dynamics and a lack of genuine desire, and you'll be screwed if you lose it. But I will say it's the easiest to get started, because you really just have to meet women, and then you have a social circle, and then presumably you will get leads eventually. But the problem with that is that a lot of the time you'll just end up friend zoned. This happens to so many guys. They'll just be waiting and waiting. And if you approach one of the women in your social circle, you'll have permanent poisoning of the well. So yeah, meeting women through a social circle isn't viable for most guys. I'm sure if you're super high status, that meeting women through your social circle is really viable, but for most men, social circle is not practical at all, despite what some might try to teach you and sell you about it. Rich and getting status maxed. So this is something that a lot of red pill people will promote, and I would identify as pretty red pill, but I'm not sure how viable this is for an average guy. You know, if you get rich and if you status max, then you will see a lot of success with women. So if you have the ability and the drive to pursue this, then sure, go ahead. But it's going to be unattainable for most men. Most men aren't going to reach massive success or fame. That's just not how things work. And looks maxing. There's some ROI in here, some return on investment, but it's unlikely to fix your dating life if you are at least average. Now, let's say someone is a 5 and he goes from a 5 to an 8. That would be a huge difference. That would fix his dating life massively if he was struggling. Presuming he doesn't have terrible social skills and he isn't completely autistic. But, you know, for most guys, you're not going to go from a 5 to an 8. You're going to go from a 5 to like a 6 or a 6.5. Looks maxing doesn't really work unless you like hard max, you know, like you get a shit ton of plastic surgery and you hop on fucking steroids and shit. But even then, it's not a guarantee. You know, you'd probably only gain like 2 points at most. But, you know, it's still a good thing to do. And, you know, most guys, if you're struggling, you should do some form of looks maxing. But I just say do some like soft looks maxing, you know. Just go to the gym, I guess. Try to get somewhat leaner. You don't have to be super lean. And just like get a haircut, you know, and take care of yourself. So like I said before, pickup artistry is an untapped market in the current decade. There aren't that many guys that are learning this stuff, that are learning social skills or charisma or game specifically, learning the kind of game that gets you laid. It's a pretty niche thing right now. And it's always been pretty niche, but I guess its peak was in like the 2000s when there was actually a TV show with mystery that I'm forgetting what it's called. I think it was called The Pickup Artist. So finally, how do different groups feel about our current dating market? So women perceive men as being afraid of commitment, but they're not realizing that this is because they refuse to date men who are on their level or below. And they're upset with being used for sex by chads, of course. And the bottom 90% of men are either frustrated with their results or suffering from a complete lack of intimacy, inceldom, or have successfully coped in other ways. And then the top 10% of men are satisfied, more or less. And here are some potential solutions. Now, I'm not going to talk about these because I don't want this video to get taken down, but I might make a video about this on the future. I'm not sure, but I definitely have to be careful. So here are some potential solutions. One, men could collectively wake up and raise our standards and just decide not to settle for women who are below us. You know, the current trend we see is 5 out of 10 men settling for 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 women, and 6 out of 10 men settling for 4s and 5s, you know, and 7s and 8s being with 5s and 6s. As Gen Z men, and I guess maybe some millennials, we have to raise our standards and decide, you know what, I'm just going to date women that are objectively on my level, that are objectively looks matched with me or above. If we all did that, then it would definitely fix the dating dynamic we have right now. And I think that this has actually became more of a thing, you know? I'm not sure if this is mainstream yet, but there are a lot of guys that accurately rate women, you know? We're not just calling every woman who knows how to apply makeup and who is skinny a 10. We're not doing that anymore. We're rating them somewhat accurately, though there are people that will use the PSL scale or whatever and completely underrate people, like rate objectively attractive people like a 4.5 out of 10 or something. I just want to be realistic with how we rate women. I think that's the best thing to do. And second is returning to older forms of dating. Marriage prioritized, no sex before marriage. This could work. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to do a complete reversal on that. But, you know, if we could more incentivize monogamy, that would probably have good effects. We're just spitballing here. Thirdly, restrictions placed on male promiscuity. Now, I know that the common wisdom is that women being promiscuous is the problem, which that definitely does have negative effects on women. But male promiscuity has consequences not for the guy that's being promiscuous, but for every other guy who can't get women anymore because the Chad is just monopolizing all the women. Male promiscuity is not talked about enough. We don't talk enough about the role these men who just go below their level and just like have sex with any woman that comes along have on the dating market. And fourth, we have sex robots. I'm going to say this is not a viable solution because even if a sex robot was like somewhat realistic, I still wouldn't be interested. I don't think most men would be interested because the pleasure and satisfaction of having sex with a woman, I think, comes primarily from the fact that you know it's a real woman. If it's not a real woman, then it's just it's like watching porn, but a little more close to the real thing, a little closer to the real thing. So yeah, sex robots. I think sex robots work for some guys, but for most of us, sex robots aren't really going to solve the issue of not getting laid. Then the fifth potential solution is state mandates. So state mandates would be a state-mandated girlfriend. This definitely isn't going to work. Like, there's no way, if this got proposed, like, women would absolutely freak out, and because I guess this would qualify as SA. This would qualify as state-mandated SA. So, you know, maybe almost understandably they would have an issue with it. So yeah, I don't think this is a viable solution. Anyways, thanks for watching.